Thank you very much. And if anyone didn't know, Mary and Michael and some others from around here were also instrumental in making things happen in Pittsburgh a little while back in getting the Peace Movements Act together with plans for October 5th in D.C. and October 17th everywhere and surrounding dates to regenerate this peace movement. And I've enjoyed watching and working with Michael and Pat and Mary and lots of you folks for years now, and I've been part of PDA since it got started, since I was working for Congressman Kucinich on his campaign, which sadly we lost. But I can remember, gee, less than a year ago, when you had to support the president no matter what to be a good American, even if he was a war criminal, right?
Yeah.
So something has changed, and my thinking would be you call up these schools and you say, okay, if you're going to keep out the commander-in-chief, we want every recruiter and every military exam kept out too. I make that deal. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Daybreak, this new book. We published it on September 1st and had a little campaign to see if we could put it at #1 on Amazon.com on politics books, because there was a guy named Glenn Beck who had the #1 spot there with a rip-off, to say the least, of Tom Paine called Common Sense. And we did. Daybreak became the #1 politics book and the #1 nonfiction book on Amazon.com. And it's slowly dropping. It's still in the top 20 for sure, but it's dropping. And so I want to push to keep it up there more, but also to buy it everywhere else too, and to support local bookstores. And there's a Borders that's going to have an event later this evening for those of you who want to come and get your book there, and bring all your friends, and talk more about the issues that we're talking about here. But also I'll sign your book over here at the table if you haven't got one already. Mary mentioned that supplemental vote, so I just want to say a couple words about it. There were, correct me if I'm wrong, there were 2 members of Congress from Ohio who voted against that war supplemental, even when it was an easy throwaway vote to please your constituents, because all the Republicans were voting yes. And their names were Kucinich and Capter. And then came the real fight, because they went to the Senate, they added the IMF thing, all the Republicans committed to voting no, and now those 51 Democrats who just for show had voted no, if 39 of them still voted no, it was going down. And so they couldn't let all 51 just vote no without threats and kicks and bribes and promises and deals and badgering. And we fought with the Democratic leadership and the White House, and they did nothing else for a week. And they made promises they are still working to fulfill to win that vote. And we held 30, not 39. But the 30 that we held included Marcy Kaptur and Dennis Kucinich. So that was a very easy one that we lost. The next one may be harder, but we developed some techniques and some skills and some allies and some coalition work that was very, very impressive and shocked all of us that were working on it. So it was encouraging in some ways. I just drove through the great state of Pennsylvania for countless hours, and at least 3/4 of the billboards had giant green light bulbs and the word coal. And some of them said clean energy, and some of them said the energy solution of the future, and some of them said affordable energy for the past 100 years with no bailouts. Right? This is the standard now for a good American company that you should love and support. Hasn't taken any bailouts, right? Never mind all the tax cuts for coal. Never mind that we used to send the military into West Virginia against U.S. citizens for right? This is why you have a Labor Day, because they're assuming that nobody knows the history of this country. Right? But this is what you see when you drive through Pennsylvania. And you know, one of the deals that they made with my congressman in Virginia to get him to vote for the IMF part of it, he loves wars, but to get him to vote for the IMF thing, a Democrat, was that they would do all kinds of press events with him. So in the weeks following that vote, in July and August, they had visits to my town for no news breaking, no particular reason, just to put him on the front page, with cabinet secretaries, with Steny Hoyer, with Van Jones, and other environmental top officials from the White House. And Van Jones, who was at least willing, willing if he knew what he was doing, to be part of these deals. But now Mr. Number One Nonfiction, Glenn Beck, said he should be fired, and the president fired him. And, well, he resigned. I mean, do you remember when Senator Feingold supported Ashcroft's nomination because if he's good to the Republicans, they'll be nice to him? And he sort of slowly learned, and like the other 99 senators are trailing behind him on the learning curve. Well, Mr. President, you give Glenn Beck an absurd demand. He's already tweeting his worshipers to investigate the next 3 people that he wants to kick out of the White House. You do not give the Republicans things so they will be nice to you. They will not be nice to you. If this new Congress and this new White House had come in and said, we are going to do single-payer health care, and then compromised from there as needed, and came in and said, we are going to prosecute war crimes, even if they involve former top officials, with Bush and Cheney confessing to torture on TV, wouldn't be a big stretch. We are going to end this militarism. We're going to end these wars. We're going to say no to your crazy accusations of being wimpy leftists, and we're going to do what the people are demanding. Well, the response that they're afraid of, the reason that they will tell you to your face that they don't do these things, that they're going to energize the right, that they're going to create attacks from the right. Well, those attacks from the right would have been exactly identical to what they are today, having given them only 90% of what they want. The president would have been called a foreigner, a socialist, an evildoer, a leftist. They would have started bringing guns to his rallies. You know. But that's what they do now. The right cannot be more energized. So there's nothing to lose, but there is something to gain. You could energize the rest of the country, the 80% of us who never show up on TV. Right, so my thinking on healthcare is this. You pass the Employee Free Choice Act next week, you energize the labor movement, you build a labor movement, you come back in a couple of years and you pass single-payer health care. Oh, but you can't pass the Employee Free Choice Act because of the filibuster. Okay, well here's what you do on Monday. You end the filibuster rule. It's not in the Constitution, it's not a law, it's not even on television. It's a rule in the Senate. It takes 51 senators to change that rule. Why won't they do it? Because they want an anti-democratic measure that allows senators that represent 12% of Americans so they can use it in case the Republicans are in charge. And by this strategy of all defense all the time, they guarantee that, yes indeed, there will again be Republicans in charge. But for any senator or any Congress member to support keeping a measure in place that allows the representatives of 12% of us to block all legislation in the Senate and therefore in the House too, is a disgrace. An absolute disgrace. I don't care what party, if any, you belong to. So squeezing one bill in with this reconciliation maneuver leaves in place the problem for every other bill on every other issue, including the Employee Free Choice Act. Right? And what is the labor movement doing? Sending slightly agitated handwritten notes. Is that what got us decent pay?
No.
Is that what got us the weekend? Is that what got us a living wage? We need a labor movement. And we need the Employee Free Choice Act. And it's a chicken and egg problem, but we got to push both. And we got to honor Labor Day by remembering what the hell it took to create a labor movement. It took a hell of a lot more than any of us are doing for a hell of a lot longer than it takes us to get discouraged these days. And there's a few myths floating around that are really muddying up this question on the health care bill and every other bill. Because when you talk about, well, let's get aggressive about it, a lot of people will say, yeah, that's what the president should be doing. The problem is Congress. Our noble president, with his good intentions, he just needs to push harder. He needs to write the bill for them, which I guess he's now going to do. Well, you know, Senator Baucus, who's supposedly the logjam here because he took $2 million from the health industry, the health industry. Well, raise your hand if you know who took $18 million. Obama. In fact, you could take your top dozen senators from any industry, add up all the money, and you're not going to come close to the record contributions from each industry that Barack Obama took. And the fact that he's not written the bill, which is the appropriate thing, Congress is the first branch of our government which should write the bills. Yes, the president is right on that, or was. Doesn't mean he hasn't been backstage cutting every deal. When they pre-compromised and self-censored and said, we're going to start by asking for public option, which I was delighted to hear already discussed before I got up here, that was a compromise with the president. That wasn't a compromise with Republicans. Republicans, you don't compromise with Republicans. They are going to call you a traitor and a commie if you give them 99% of what they want, not if you give them a little bit more than that. You know, so that was a deal with the president. When George Miller, who chaired the committee, voted no on the Kucinich amendment that we've been discussing, Barack Obama had told him to. George Miller, another co-sponsor of 676, voted no on allowing states to do single payer because the president had told him to. So the solution is not to say we need a superhero. We need the president to write the bills. We need the president to order. And you'll hear this from progressives, Democrats in Congress. They'll say the problem is the president isn't ordering us to do better because they can't fathom the idea of putting a good bill on his desk and telling him to sign it or veto it. Maybe it'll have a few things in there on negotiating with drug companies that the president hasn't approved. That would be wonderful. But they're waiting for him, and that's backwards. That's upside down, right? The first 60% of the Constitution, Article 1, which branch is it about? Which branch is given 80% of the powers in the thing? The first branch of our government, the Congress, not the executive, not the replacement for the king who we had just fought a war against. So in this book, I sort of took a month off of activism, and I sat down and said, what is wrong? What can we do about it? And I looked at short-term solutions, like on this topic, throw out the filibuster. There's no excuse not to. Long-term solutions that would require further steps, including amending the Constitution, which we should be doing very frequently. They expected it of us, and we are not, is get rid of the Senate. The Senate serves no useful purpose. The Senate has blocked countless progressive, decent, democratic measures for 2 centuries. The Senate, the House would have ended slavery 8 times. The Senate said we have to have a civil war. Right? These things are not inevitable. They happen because of anti-democratic measures. The Senate was created to block majority will, to slow it down, to cool it off. That's what it's done. That's what it will continue to do, even without the filibuster. Right? And you can say, oh, but the states have to have equal representation for each state because we're a federal system and so forth. Well, the public that lives in the smallest states, if you look at their positions on issues, line up far better with what the House does than what the Senate does. And the measures that strip state and local governments of power are driven by the Senate. And the idea that you can have 2 senators in Wyoming and 2 senators in California and call it democratic and call it representational is absolutely absurd. So I go in the book into sort of ideal solutions that are hard to get and the pros and cons and what would be a complete package that I can't possibly go into in 10 minutes of reforms. And I would include enlarging the House. Hasn't been done in a long, long time, and these guys are trying to represent way too many people. Not humanly possible. It would include getting rid of the money, getting rid of the campaign contributions, as they're called. It would include providing free airtime on our airwaves for campaigns. It would include getting rid of the incredible power of the parties, which was never a good idea and not the intention of many of the founders. In fact, an incredible fear they had. And you know, it's tempting to think right in this moment, God, if the Democrats had the sort of discipline the Republicans have, then we could just push through at least this halfway health care reform. But if the Democrats had discipline, there would be absolutely no opposition to wars in Washington, D.C. So a different solution would be to make Congress members accountable to their constituents rather than a party leader of any party, which in this case would mean you would have some Republicans backing health care. So, as well as at least as many Democrats as you have now, almost certainly many more, because they would be enacting the will of their constituents. So I look into all of these problems and solutions. Election verification is another huge one. And I look especially into questions of power, because this shift of power to the White House, not just in our thinking, but really in reality, in the structure of our government, and who has the power to do what, is accelerated tremendously over the past 8 years, and has been reversed not at all in the past 8 months. So that we have presidents now with the power to make laws, with signing statements, with executive orders, with secret memos. We have presidents with the power to make war, with the power to make treaties independent of the Senate or the House, with the powers of secrecy that were never imagined. And I look especially at the fact that even if we fix everything, even if we repeal all the bad laws, pass all the good laws, pass all the constitutional amendments we want, unless we enforce some of our laws, there's no point. And so we have to have an expansion of this incredible joke of an investigation that our Attorney General has proposed. Right? Because if we're going to investigate the possibility of having a full investigation of the possibility of prosecuting the lowest ranked employees of the CIA in certain incidents for torture, but we're going to give immunity, openly state that we're giving immunity to the people who created the program and the lawyers who drafted the secret memos. If that happens, it will be worse than nothing. I would rather have them not do it, which is their desire, than do it and stop there. But it doesn't have to stop there. Right? Because that would set in stone that presidents can tell a lawyer to write down that a blatant crime is legal, and then it's legal. But it doesn't have to stop there. And in fact, there's a decent chance that if there is a prosecution, even of the lowest, they're going to help move it up the chain. They're going to talk about, right? I mean, we already have you and Cheney and Fife and others passing the buck to Bush in the newspapers, on the TV. These guys have no loyalty to each other. It's a question of whether the prosecutors have the nerve. So we have to push the Justice Department, but we can also push our representatives in Congress, both to do it themselves and to push the Justice Department. One thing they could do is take the guy who was in charge of John Yoo and in charge of the memos, who is now a judge for life, just below the Supreme Court, appeals level, 9th Circuit, West Coast, Jay Bybee, and impeach him. They just impeached a judge in Texas for groping people. You know, but I'm sorry, it does not say impeachment for treason, bribery, or other crimes and misdemeanors as long as there's sex involved. It says impeachment for treason, high crimes, and bribery. So you have a situation where a guy who legalized torture is now sitting on the 9th Circuit. Fortunately, he was not involved in a ruling that came down a couple days ago. There was incredibly good news that said that John Ashcroft can be sued for lawlessly locking people up because they were Muslim. This is very, very good news. This is where the good news is coming from, his court decisions. There's no reason there can't be some good news from Congress. So they can pursue impeachment. They can pursue something that Congressman John Conyers proposed in January and hasn't lifted a finger to do, and that is to extend the statutes of limitations that are about to tick out on this thing while they investigate whether to investigate. And they can create a select committee to make public what is happening. They can hold hearings in existing committees. They can create a new church committee. They can do any kind of format they want. But the question of whether it's of any good or not comes down to who enforces the subpoenas. Who can tell me who enforces congressional subpoenas? Well, for the past 75 years or so, Congress has refused to enforce its own subpoenas and has asked the Justice Department to do it, which worked fine, up until you were subpoenaing former employees of the Justice Department and criminal allies of the Justice Department and of the thug at the top of this mafia organization, George Bush. And so you have a Capitol Police force that, trust me, knows how to lock people up. You have lots of jails. Believe me, raise your hand if you've been in a jail on Capitol Hill. You're slacking. October 5th, get with it. It's painless, it's fun, there's camaraderie, you sing songs. Medical studies will tell you it's good for you to do these things. I'm not kidding. But your Congress member will tell you that he's never heard of inherent contempt. She can't do it because the sergeant at arms is elderly. They closed down the jail cell 50 years ago. No. Come on. When Congressman Conyers was in the minority and gung-ho for impeachment with us, and we got him, when we got Democrats that we couldn't trust as far as we would throw them, to elected so that he would be the chairman, and then he turned against impeachment because Nancy said so, and we turned against him and sat in his office. He locked us all up by the hundreds. No shortage of cops, no shortage of jail cells. Well, you have a new president, and you have dozens of subpoenas that were simply ignored during the previous Congress. They don't reissue a single one of them. With Myers and Rove, they negotiate a deal with the White House counsel, Rove's buddy, Greg Craig, for partial compliance. Come on. This is not how you move power back to the Congress. This is how you play games with the people you are truly loyal to, those who run your party, despite them being in a different branch of our government. So I think public opinion is starting to turn. I think that we came into this new Congress and this new presidency largely with an attitude appropriate to a coup rather than an election. Following a coup, you do sit home and watch out and leave them alone and let them do what they're going to do. Following an election in a representative republic, it is part of the bargain you make. It's not the least disrespectful. It's what you owe them to tell them how you want to be represented. And the president will quote Franklin Roosevelt and tell you the same exact thing. And we're starting to wake up to that. It's starting. It was predictable and predicted that it would take this long, but we have to learn these things over and over again every time. I think activism is recovering. I think there's going to be a huge showing at the G20, not far from here in Pittsburgh, on the 24th and 25th of this month. A huge showing on the 5th of the next month, October 5th, Washington, D.C., and October 17th, and roundabout dates all over the place against these wars, no matter whose wars they are now. I think we need to rethink how we do activism, because we see these coal companies and these insurance companies writing phony letters to Congress members from grassroots groups and organizing rallies and telling people they're going to have $4 a gallon gasoline and they're going to kill their mothers, and they get out and they have the rallies, and it's fake, it's phony, it's astroturf. But when almost every progressive group takes its language on health care from the Democrats in Congress and goes out and tells the people what to rally the Democrats in Congress to do, then we are props. We are not citizens. We may be props for a better cause than those guys are props for, but we're not independent. We're not forming our thinking on our own and taking it to Washington. We're letting them tell us. So we have to work on these things. We have to have the independence and the thinking and the courage. Above all, we have to not be intimidated to do it. And you know, this is Labor Day, and working people, tomorrow is Labor Day, and working people are getting kicked, and they don't have as much time to be citizen activists. They don't have as much time to be informed. Productivity has gone like this, and wages have gone like this, and the gap keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it lets people like Glenn Beck tell people who are struggling that their enemies are immigrants and blacks and gays and welfare and entitlements, and sort of conflate that with the banker bailout that we all opposed, and direct people in these crazy directions. Because people don't know any better. They don't have time to read the 20 books it would take to explain to them what was wrong with Glenn Beck's book. They're struggling. We got to help them. We got to help them. Somebody was just telling me about John Brown's history in this part of the country. And there was a song that had his name in it. And if I was a singer, I would sing these words that I'm going to speak. And I'll just end with this. When the Union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one, but the Union makes us strong.
Solidarity forever.
Thank you again.